Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Wednesday. It's December 6th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And really, for the most part, we just had a range day today. If you look from where the 8:30 open occurred, we just went sideways. We continue to kind of make higher highs here, but I'm going to you want to classify this. We're constantly above and below the EMA, and that's a range day. It was big enough to where there's a little short-term trend, so it makes it a little bit easier to trade. But the key is generally where you want to get in is on the low side or the high side or the first or the lower high. When you start to enter across the middle, it does become a little bit more suspect. So just keep that in mind. Generally, this trade or your next high or your lower high, when you're off your highs, your lower. Actually, let me back up. Off the highs, your lower high, and off the lows, your higher low. That makes sense. So we'll talk about it in a minute. But um, earlier I had the highs down here, but as you can see, they moved up. We had more touches and closes up along this level around 26.33 and a quarter or so. And this turned out to be where most of your lows were with 26.26 down here. So uh, we had a failed break lower. We actually had a uh, failed break higher as well, but you really don't get a setup off that one until it's after 2 o'clock, so I didn't mark it. But let me back out a little more. We'll talk about these trades and we'll wrap it up for the day. But when I came in, we were actually trending up. Um, this trade here, you could argue for this one to be green because it's just a first entry. But notice what you've got here. You've got a trend line there, and it bounces right off that trend line. Um, and gives you that third touch. It confirms it. It's a fairly bullish bar. It's closing still above the EMA. Um, Plenty of room to get out. So I like that trade. You could probably argue, since it's just a first entry, you could probably argue for it to be green. But it's also a little bit of a breakout pullback long. Um, there's a little bit of resistance right across here. But you can see we're making higher highs and higher lows here. And so as long as you got enough room to get out there, I like that trade. It comes back again and gives you another bounce. It's very similar. This bar is really neutral here, and we didn't quite get to the high, so there's a chance there's a break. I really didn't even want to make this one green, but at the same time, it's still a bounce off that key entry point. And if you could get in here, let it break higher and back up a little bit and get in here, uh, a little better entry, then maybe you go with that one. But I really think you're better off skipping that one. And there's you could even count this as a second entry long because it didn't break lower, but it's still a lower high here. But it's right into that high. Notice how we're starting to go, how the moves are bigger and they're getting smaller and smaller. It turns out to be a nice move, but you don't know that in advance, so you really just have to skip that one. Again, you could probably argue for it to be green because it is a second entry, but it's a lot of sideways stuff there, really, and I think you're better off to skip it. This one was really tempting. It's so far away from the EMA, but we hadn't had a close yet, and this is a nice trend working up, so you really don't want to risk going short there. Same thing down here. Your trend line's still in play here. It's a first entry, and it's a nice move. You finally get your higher low right here, but you're already back to the high, so you can't really risk that. And if you had of, you probably would have got burned, and it would have you would have gotten trapped and burned. So that's the reason we have the rules the way we do. Um, and generally, even though occasionally you'll see a good trade go without you, you can't let that bother you because you did the right. As long as you do the right thing, even if a trade takes off, you still did the right thing. Because the next time you try to do the right thing, or you don't do the right thing, and the trade backfires on you, which it will most of the time. So, people will say, send me something and say, I really wanted to enter here, but the rules said you shouldn't, and I didn't, and you get a big move like this, and I feel like I missed the trade. But no, if you follow the rules, you did the right thing. So just remember that. Just because it worked once, it probably won't work the majority of the time, and the next time you try that same trade, it'll fail on you. And that's why we don't do that. So, but anyway, you just kind of had to be patient from till about almost 9:30. So it was really slow in here. The only thing again, you do have your break and a new high here. So you might argue, and notice we're a good ways away from the EMA. You could probably argue that one to be green. Generally, you want to wait on that lower high. But if you're wanting to be aggressive, that's one I could live with, and it would have worked. You see, you would have got a nice move. But generally, I like to wait on that lower high, and it doesn't come till way down here. Just like this, when we were looking for the higher low here, it didn't come till way up here. So unfortunately, that's just the way it works sometimes, and there's nothing you can do about it. But anyway, we're moving down. We've got a little close outside, new low. Looks like it's going to bounce, but this is so close, it's kind of hard to tell. And you really could probably draw this a little more like that. It still fits like that. I was trying to get those early closes, the reason I drew it that way. But you could argue for it to be like that, and then you get your break. And so some people probably saw it that way. But anyway, you get your break, move to a new low. And I like this short because you're moving down, and that's really your first entry. And then you pull back, and there's a second entry, and it fails. And it did bounce off these low and look like it's going to make a double bottom, but you got enough room to get out. So with that failed second entry long, I like taking that one because you're probably going to trap some people. And guess what? It runs down, makes that new low, and then it bounces. And this is a nice bullish bar here. So I like this one just to ride it back to the EMA. This is a reversal type bar. And so now you got a double bottom, and you actually got some lows over here too. And so now you've got a true failed break lower, and you're a little bit away from the EMA, so you're probably going to snap back. Again, this is real close. It could be green because generally you need to wait on that higher low, which doesn't come till here. But still, you got enough room to get out this time. So I like taking this one, and it takes on off and actually makes a new high. But you get a close outside, move to a new high. So now you're just waiting on a lower high, and you end up making one more higher high. And that's why I like to wait on the lower high, because sometimes it'll make one more push just enough to trap you out, and then it turns down. And the only reason I don't like going short right there is because that's a true doji, and usually that's a one bar trading range, and so you never know that it doesn't break lower and push up one more time. So you really need to wait on a lower high here, and you get one here, but it's too bullish. But then you get your failed second entry long. I like entering there, and if you weren't already in, it makes another little bearish bar here and a higher low. So that's really a second entry short, and it's still following that trend line. So I like entering there as well. It does start to look like it's going a little bit sideways, but it's breaking higher here and not going anywhere. So at some point, it's probably going to make that. You got one leg down, and you're probably going to make that next leg down, and hopefully you go all the way to the other side of the range, which it ends up doing. So you get a couple of chances. You can enter there. You can, and if you weren't in, you can get in here, and you could add on there. I wouldn't be afraid to add on there, to be honest with you. Then it comes down. Of course, it bounces right at this same location again. You do get a close outside that's clear on this one, a new low. It bounces. They're stacked up a little bit there, but you know, on a range day, you're expecting it to go higher. So if you want to be aggressive, you're still a little ways from the EMA. You might enter right there. Your higher low comes right here, and this is what you generally want to wait on. And it tries to go lower, and there's a bit of a trend line. I originally had it drawn a little bit steeper and then adjusted it. I originally had it drawn like that. And it doesn't matter. It works the same either way. But you get that little push lower, and so I like going long there. Just catching that higher low back up to the other side, and off it goes. And again, here's a good example. That's a nice bearish bar off that high. Makes a perfect double top up there. But you don't have a close outside this trend line yet. And you wouldn't have got out of this before it bounced and made that new high. So that's why I like to wait on the lower high. And you see here, this one would have worked if you'd have taken it, but your lower high is your better entry right there. And then it gives that little trap when it tries to go higher there. And so you could have entered either one of those. It's almost kind of a repeat of this, just a little bigger pattern. And look at it, and now it takes off. So but this is after 2 o'clock, so I didn't mark anything. So just a range day today. And generally what you're going to look for is to get long off the lows to get and ride it to the highs, and get short off the highs and ride it to the lows. And that's generally what you want to do on a range type day like this. And even though it's a range day, it's it's not a huge range, but there's enough room in there to get a little bit of a trend and to catch a higher low or whatever. What's really bad is when the whole range is about 3 points wide, like this little thing here, and you don't have room to do anything. So remember that. But anyway, not much else I can say about today. It's just really from the open, we were going sideways. You're constantly swinging above and below the EMA, and that's your real clue. Notice what's happening here. You're pretty much trending here because you're constantly, once you got above the EMA, you're constantly above it until about right here, and then it starts swinging back and forth. So that's the difference between a trend and a range. And so keep that in mind. On range days, you'll be above, below, above, below, above, below, above, below, below, above, back to below. And so that's the way range days work. And when you see that, you know it's a range, and you probably can trade it both ways. I would say this, even though this is a range day, I would say it has a slightly upward bias, because notice how we're making new highs constantly all day long. We kept making newer highs, so that tells you that it does have a little bit of an upward bias. Generally, the one thing I like about this trade is I talk about this a lot when we have range days. When you get those failed breaks, they often become major lows or highs for the day, depending on which way it breaks. And so that's why I like taking the risk on these a lot of times. Is if you caught this, you catch the major low of the day. Of course, it came back really close on this, but you could have ridden this all the way up. And so I like to catch those. And if you'd have treated this as a failed break, which it is, it's not as clear as this one, but it's still the same thing. This is definitely one, and if you catch it, then you catch a major high for the afternoon. You wouldn't have entered till here really, but you still had caught a major high for the day, and we almost closed on the low down here. So it's not a big move, but sometimes you can catch really big moves on, when you catch these points. So, but I love those, to try to catch these, because they're always generally major lows if they're off the failed breaks lower, or major highs if they're failed break higher. So, but anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow and wrap up our week for tomorrow. But I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.